Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Dr. Steve Gowden III. I'm very confident that each and every one of you has had a very enjoyable, a very productive, and a very successful first quarter of the 2023-24 school year. The year is moving fast. We're very excited about the opportunities that we continue to provide for our students, our employees, our parents, and our community at large. Today, we have a tremendous opportunity to really speak to individuals who represent the heartbeat, who represent the engine, who represent what I've described as the fulcrum of the educational experience. I've said before, maybe about 25 years ago when I published my dissertation, that the classroom is where the core technology of education takes place. Who are the conductors in the classroom? We're talking about teachers. Today, I have a very unique opportunity to really speak to individuals who represent the core mission of our school district. Yes, we're very excited about our principals. We're always appreciative of our administrators, our support staff, but we cannot have a school system if we don't have teachers. Teachers drive everything that we're committed to do, and quite frankly, they reflect the obligation that we have to our students, to this community, to this state, and to this nation, because everyone in some shape, form, or fashion has had their lives touched and impacted by a teacher. Everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what your walk of life is, your background, your ethnicity, your experiences, everyone has had their lives touched by a teacher. So I wanted to take this opportunity to speak to a group of teachers, not just any group of teachers, but a group of individuals who represent really the history of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I'm going to speak with teachers who have had an opportunity to serve this district, to serve this community, to serve our state, our nation, and our world, and to serve our students well over 40 years. So my guests today are teachers who have 40 years or more of experience in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Yes, you heard me correctly. 40 years or more. So my guests, again, bring tremendous amount of insight, experience, and history, something that we must appreciate, something that we must embrace, and something that we must always value. So again, welcome to Real Talk with Dr. Steve Gowden III. My guests today are Mr. Fankhauser, Dr. Jackson, and Mr. Martinez. And I'll let them introduce themselves and their background and their experiences here in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We'll start with the lady in the middle, Dr. Joy Jackson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gowden, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here to speak concerning public education. Yes, I am a teacher. I am an educator. I've been teaching for 49 years, all in Miami-Dade County Public School System. I'm a music teacher. I presently teach at Robert Rennick Educational Center and Emotional Behavior Disturbed Center School that services from County Line Road to Flagler Street. I am the music teacher, the only one there. And my philosophy is, if I may say so, is that as a teacher, I serve. And that is my calling as an educator, is to serve our students to the best of my ability.
I was a classroom teacher, not 49 years, obviously. I was an English teacher, so I have some experience in math. Let's do the math on that. 49 years. What year did you start in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools?
1975.
1975. For the viewers, in 1975, I was 6 years old. In 1975, when you began this tremendous journey to really touch so many lives, and I can only imagine the amount of lives that you've touched.
Yes.
Over nearly 5 decades. You're knocking on the door 50 years.
Yes.
In public education in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
Yes.
My next guest is Mr. Martinez. Tell us about your background, your experience, and your years of service in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
I started exactly March 14, 1983. But not all as a teacher. I've worn very numerous hats. I started out in the office helping out with the attendance. Then I moved into a paraprofessional. The office at Miami Springs Junior High, when it was a junior high. Then I went to Northwestern Senior High as a paraprofessional. From there, I led to Robert Renick, where Joy Jackson is at. I was there for about 10 years. I circled back to Miami Springs, now as a middle school, also as a paraprofessional, working with the LEP students there. Then I ran a reading lab. Then I became a math teacher in 2005. Did that for 3 years, and I've been a PE teacher now since 2008 till today. I've been a PE teacher, and I'm currently at Henry Reeves K-8 Center.
Well, thank you for your service. 40 years in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools,
Yes.
having an opportunity to work in different schools and different communities with different students. Shout out to Miami Northwestern Senior High School.
This is the old one with Dr. Monroe.
I know a little bit about it. I was a student there, and I served as principal there for 7 years. Mr. Fankhauser,
Hi.
am I pronouncing it?
You are pronouncing it correct.
All right, yes.
Okay, Brett Fankhauser. I currently am a physical education teacher at Charles R. Hadley Elementary. And I started out likewise as before paraprofessional. It was called the teacher's aide or a teacher's assistant. And that was at Tropical Elementary. I worked with a group of students with learning disabilities. There it was more of a specialized center. I went from there to working as a physical education teacher at South Miami Elementary, which has dramatically changed, over the years, and then took a leap of faith, if I want to call it, and went to Dallas, Texas, and taught and coached with their school system out there before I had come back home and started working at neighboring school, Floral Heights Elementary.
Okay.
And had the pleasure of going to Northwestern a couple of times on workshops. And Floral Heights, from there in 2003, went to Charles Hadley, which is where I am presently as a physical education teacher.
Thank you. Thank you again. I want to thank you all for your service to this community, to our students, and for investing a significant portion of your lives. We know that the sacrifices that you make, not only professionally but personally, are really significant, and I salute you and I thank you. We're going to jump right into it. 40 plus years. I want to ask a question, but before I do that, I often tell people when I earn my doctorate, which I'm very, very proud of, earning it from FIU, I tell students and I tell people that I earned my doctorate before the internet. I know I'm a young man, but we did not have the luxury of Google. We didn't have the luxury of going online and cutting and pasting. We actually had to go to the library with a pocket full of coins. I went to FIU South, and we would go into the catalog and we would pull out magazines and we would pull out microfiche. And we would make copies of the articles or whatever research we're doing. If we were fortunate enough that somebody didn't snatch the page out that you're trying to copy. Fast forward to where we are right now. Obviously, technology has been significantly important in education and quite frankly in life. But I often use that as a juxtaposition to how quickly things have changed and how different it was at the time. Specifically speaking about learning in the classroom, how would you describe the changes from 40 years ago to now, outside of the technology, but just the dynamic of changing? Because there's this continued narrative regarding how technology plays a role, but that narrative is often debunked, as it should be, with the reality that there's no substitute for a classroom, breathing, human, loving, compassionate human being in front of students. How would you describe that change?
Well, let me fast forward. Perrine Elementary, the first one, we used to have Spanish over the PA system, which was basically broadcast from downtown, down to the school district, over the PA system, and we used to sit there in our desks and they would have us repeat Spanish over and over again, and we got a grade for it. Fast forward, we have Spanish teachers now, which, to the best of my knowledge, 2.5 hours each week for all students in the classroom. So there is no substitute for that almost informal technology to classroom teachers today. You know,
So you're saying the entire school would get instruction through a speaker system
through a speaker system.
that is coming from central office to
Correct.
teach students Spanish
Correct.
versus having an individual classroom teacher in the classroom.
That is correct.
That's a significant change. Any other changes you want to share?
I want to say that from what I remember, we would have, what was that, like a diddle machine before, something like that. We used to bring diddles and we would make copies. But now you don't even have to do that. We went from a chalkboard to a smart board, where these
Permuting
boards,
boards,
you just
yeah.
touch them with your finger and you have technology at your fingertips. So it's a major, massive change from writing there and every day getting a wet paper towel or something and cleaning your chalkboard till what we have today.
Was with my medium, when I first started teaching, we had to, I was at elementary school in Homestead, had to drive to Homestead every day. And we had a little push cart that we never had our personal space. My personal space was in the main office. I had a little desk, but I had to push cart all of my little bills or recorders to each classroom. Today, you have primarily your classroom, but there is nothing more important than a physical body in a classroom that our students can physically see, physically hear, physically be there in the presence, because our students, our babies, they need a physical presence, because so many of our students have such economic diversities. Some have a little bit more, some have a lot less. Some need more, some need that motherly, some need that fatherly, some need that. And it's nothing at all like that. If I may say so, I remember when I was in elementary school that we had that teacher. Mm-hmm. You know, at my age, it's like I still can remember my first grade teacher, my second grade teacher, my third grade teacher, mm-hmm. because they played such a role in our lives. It was like they were a part of the family structure. And today, in a lot of instances, with what is happening, sometimes teachers are kind of backing off instead of having that touch, that motherly, fatherly. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but that is something that many of our students that didn't experience it, and we did, still need that. Elementary school teachers, students, they need that.
Yeah, and what you're saying has actually been affirmed. Regretfully, that affirmation came with one of the most tragic events of our civilization, and that was the pandemic. Yeah. The appreciation, the gratitude, the value, the respect of having teachers physically present, readily available to engage and support and teach, no pun intended, students, was revered at the time. But regretfully, I feel for the moment.
Yes.
So we had that episodic experience of celebrating and appreciating and valuing the role of public education, quite frankly, and the role of schools and the role of teachers in a classroom. So even if you had an opportunity to access a teacher virtually, parents lamented, people lamented about the students lamented about the difference in the disadvantage of not having a teacher present to provide that level of instruction. Yeah. So we had our reverence, we had our celebration, we had our adoration, but just like that, I think we spiraled downwardly into a space where we're not valuing teachers as much as we should,
not at all.
as much as we did when we needed them the most.
Correct.
So I think that is something that's just somewhat oxymoronic, that we appreciate teachers in the time of need, But after that time has passed, we go back to not giving the level of respect, the level of reverence that we need to do to teachers who really, as I said, opening statements, represent the engine of our school system. You have teaching that comes in the two ways. These two words always go together, teaching and learning. Teaching and learning. As a classroom teacher, in a public school setting, as a university professor, I can teach and teach and teach and teach. But what matters the most is whether or not my students are learning.
Right.
And we've seen, you've seen, I've seen to some extent, kind of dating myself a little bit. I've been around a while. I was here before schools got letter grades. When I was a principal, there were critically low schools. So we've seen the advent of different accountability mechanisms to measure and determine whether or not students have learned.
Correct.
Talk to me about that evolution that you've seen. You've gone from a period of time where what the teacher says, does, and assesses in the classroom makes the determination whether or not a student is proficient. Obviously, we had some assessments in the past, but obviously the level of accountability that we've seen over the past, I would say now 25 plus years, has been dramatic, and in some cases, some people call it draconian. Dramatic and draconian. What are your thoughts about the evolution of accountability to measure student learning that you've seen over the past 4 decades?
When you look at the teaching, in itself, going back to your days at Northwestern, when FCAT first came out, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, that FCAT was towards the end of the year, and we got the letter grade, if you will, right before school got out. Now it seems like we are testing earlier and still requiring these students to learn that full grade level of that, whatever particular grade they're on, to learn the whole year in maybe 6 months. And I think that puts a tremendous disadvantage for both the student and the teacher of being able to teach that curriculum in a short amount of time versus the end of the year.
So the FCAT, that's one iteration of the accountability system that we've seen. And I'll say it because this is real talk. I always have to say that. This is real talk. Before Jeb Bush, and this is not a partisan position, he was the governor that led the entry of a new accountability system in the state. It was not novel. It was really a family business because his brother did it in Texas, and then we brought it to Florida. So that was before the FCAT. We had the HSET. We had all kind of assessments. But before we had these dramatic, and in some cases some people call it draconian, assessment structures, what was it like to making a determination whether or not students learn? Because I didn't take the FCAT. I wasn't subject to 3rd grade retention, but I think we all turned out okay. We learned. So how would you describe the assessment process to make a decision about whether or not students learn then and now? And what's the big difference with the two?
Teachers had an opportunity to teach.
Okay.
Teachers were not focused on a letter grade. They were not focused on a specific designed test to make sure that they taught the test, but we taught so that students could learn, that students would achieve. And the assessment levels that teachers used prior to all of that was the teacher's autonomy. The teacher had the ability to be able to assess a student by what they did in that classroom. The assessment wasn't always a written test. You had verbal assessments to have students you heard that they did understand what you were being taught, what they were being taught. But now the assessment it has to be on a piece of paper or in a computer. But prior to that, students did learn. We learned. We knew how to read and write and spell and write in cursive. I don't even know if they're teaching cursive writing.
Well, you know, this is real talk.
Real
This is
talk,
real
real
talk. I'll give you the counter narrative to that. And people will be shocked to hear me say that. One of the most significant pieces of legislation that I believe that occurred in education was No Child Left Behind. Came from President Bush. I think that was a very significant piece of legislation, if not in its explicit description of what it's saying, no child left behind. So where we say children were taught and learned how to read, not all of them. Not all of them learned. All of them may have been taught. So the difference between this whole notion of the delivery of pedagogy versus students walking out being proficient, I think that's a fair narrative to debate. And for the record, I'm for accountability. I believe that if we place a student in a classroom for 180 days, he or she should be better academically, emotionally, mentally, and socially than they were when they got there.
Great.
But the question that accountability begs to ask is, how do we know? Do we know it because the teacher said so? Do we know it because the principal said so? Do we know it because the parent said so? And the system went to this factory structured model of accountability that one size fits all in terms of a metric, but we know
Doesn't work.
that's counter
No.
intuitive toward what education represents. So how do we strike that balance?
With the student.
Or how did we strike that balance in the past? How would you have known 35 years ago when you teach a student he or she is not mastering the content, what do we do about that? Versus what we do about it now. We know what we do about it now.
One of the things too is that I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. One of the things too is that summer school. You know, if a child at the end of the year, not February, but at the end of the year cannot master that particular grade level, they went to summer school. Now, we do have summer school, but it's only for certain grade levels. My opinion, again, if I can use your phrase, real talk, my opinion is that we should have summer school for all grade levels. If a child isn't reading by a certain grade level, why move him on to the next grade level to where he's more frustrated? You know, the teacher has more difficulty, again, learning, teaching to learn, you know, because the child hasn't grasped that concept.
Well, that's part of the argument that people have made regarding some of these dramatic and draconian accountability structures, is to really cease the utilization of what they described as social promotion. So if students haven't mastered the content, we still move them on. And obviously, those were things we had to deal with 25, 30, 40 years ago. And obviously, we have a different structure.
Right.
My question on accountability, and I'll move away from that. Did the dramatic, and in some cases what people describe as draconian shift on accountability, has it helped or hurt student learning, in your opinion?
It's hurt them.
Oh.
I believe it's
Okay,
hurt them.
let's
because
do tell.
because like going back to your previous question, I don't know how we actually see if they actually learned, but how funny it is that these same legislators that are pushing all these tests on teachers and students, they didn't have to do that. Apparently they did learn. So here we are, all we do is teach a test, not just one test, several tests. Because I remember when we first started school in August, within the first 2-3 weeks, we're already testing them. I mean, we just got here and we're testing them.
Okay.
And
I'm
it's
gonna come
the
back
test
to-
after another.
So you believe that the structured accountability system for student learning has hurt students? You believe you feel that way?
There's too much test. I
Do
don't
you think
believe
that test should be given?
there has to be a test
Okay.
given to see
All right.
how we have to have
Okay.
some
All
form
right.
of
Basics.
All
We
right.
have a
all right.
foundation.
Okay. Okay.
But see, going back to the HSCT, that I believe that worked, because you could see where a student is deficient in any
Well,
reading or
remember,
math.
the HSCT would be at the high school level,
Right.
so a student who doesn't passed the HSET would have been promoted almost 10, 12 years in a row to get to that particular point. But
we could use some form of that model at a third grade level to see how much they've learned, and then either give them intensive reading or math or something to bring them up to level.
what was the test we gave in elementary before FCAT? Was it the SAT we were
I
giving?
think it was
SAT.
SATs.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got your stay nines.
Stay nines. That's
Stay
what we
nines,
were.
that's
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
That's it.
So testing is not new, but the accountability system is somewhat. Dr. Jackson?
I don't feel that all testing is bad,
Okay.
but I do feel that it is too much of it.
Okay.
That I can see what maybe in some aspects of what is trying to be accomplished, because you need a baseline. And with that baseline is going to direct you of the need of the individual child. And because all dress sizes will not fit me at all, so that everything cannot be that one size fits all. It must be a level where the students can work at the level of where they are, and there are programs that accommodate that. There are programs that does that. So I don't feel that all testing is wrong, like I first stated, but a test at the beginning, a test in the middle, then you're gonna have another test. Like every 3 to 4 months, there's another test, there's another test, there's another test. And with the accountability level right now of how our state is handling the educational process in this state of Florida, oh my God. And it is hopefully with Real Talk that we can get a hold on what is actually happening, because some things, may I say so, some things are not in favor of the student.
Mr. Fankhauser, what do you think about the testing system? Did it help or hurt
Present or past?
compared to where we
Okay, well,
the evolution?
I think in
The-
the past, I think, the stay nine aspect, true story. I had to attend summer school in 4th grade. Why? Because my reading, as much as I loved it, I wasn't able to comprehend what I was reading. I was reading it, but I couldn't put it back on paper. Went to summer school. Fast forward, never attended summer school again. But I think when you had stay nines, again, what Dr. Jackson said, is that we have a baseline. This is what we're trying to get our children to reach. Most testing, even in the realm of physical education, we have a baseline that we know that this child at this age should be able to do X amount of push-ups, if you will, curl-ups, if you will, in the given amount of time. If not, then yes, they would be deficient. Yes, I tell my students these are things that you need to work on at home. So testing is important to accomplish a baseline. Beyond that, yes, I think, we have too many students in high school that get frustrated. They drop out of school. They want to go back to school later on. Hence, we put night school in there for them. But, they're still not accomplishing what we need to have the graduation.
Well, I'm glad I hear, for the most part, that we debunked this notion that teachers, we're hearing from 40-year veteran teachers that they're not against testing, that there's a need to make a determination
Assess.
where students
Yes.
are, to look at their progress, to evaluate whether or not they've been proficient, but the manner in which we go about it needs to not be a one-size-fits-all.
Correct.
And we have some consensus. Let's move to another topic that sadly continues to grab the attention of the nation. Our hearts and thoughts go out to the families and communities and individuals that are affected by the current war that's taking place, and the negative impact that it has on people here, even in the United States. We pray for peace throughout this world, throughout this community, and we pray for the safety, health, and welfare of all of mankind. But one narrative that has continued to grab attention and we get amplified in our frustration, we get amplified in our denunciation of it, we get amplified in our commitment to stand together regarding some of the issues of school violence across this country on the heels of a tragedy. And after that amplification, we go back to business as usual. Thinking about 30, 40 years ago, I can kind of remember when the first school tragedy occurred of this nature. I was a principal. It was Columbine. I don't think, unless I'm missing something, that we've had anything prior to Columbine that occurred in this nation of that magnitude. You all have seen the evolution of school conduct, school violence, the threat of it. Talk to me about that. What's your thoughts around where we were 40 years ago and where we are right now with these issues relative to school safety and just the emotional threat of the possibility that something tragically can happen in a school, in a classroom with students and employees?
I think what we've seen in the classroom, for example, growing up in the Dade County Public School System, you revered the teacher throughout school. What the teacher said, it was law, if you will. In my own particular situation, my mom was a media specialist, used to be a librarian. I feared the school calling my mom because I knew my mom basically believed the teacher first. And so we've seen a change as far as the respect that a teacher gets from the community and from the parents of our students. It's almost to the point of where our students are enabled, entitled to almost be on plane with the teacher. And I think that it's hurt, so the child has all of a sudden now, I'm gonna get back at that teacher one way, shape, or form, in this revenge, mentality, and it's not, it's supported at home.
Okay.
Well, I would like to say there were two professions, with an agreement with some of the things he just said, that people respected. That was a pastor and a teacher. And teachers did have more, I don't want to say control, but they had that level that the students knew. But a part to that, gun violence. It's too easy for our young people to grasp a gun. You turn 18, you can go and purchase a gun. The gun laws need to be a little bit more stricter. We need to put in place legislation while they are trying to do what they are trying to do to teachers and unions. It needs to be legislation with gun laws. If there is something mentally going on as a student, as someone is mentally challenged, even if they are 18, these red flag laws should be in place.
Great.
So if a student has that readily access to obtain a gun, most parents, if they had a weapon, they would have it locked up out of the reach of their children. Their children many times didn't even know where the gun was. But now if this occurs and students have the ability to carry a gun in a school because they had access, something is wrong.
Do you think that's dramatically different from what was readily available 40 years ago?
No, I think there's
Because
always
the pushback would be is that the Constitution has been in place since the founding of this country.
Correct.
So access or the right to bear arms
Correct.
was already there.
In place.
And so what would you say has been dramatically different? Is it the access to weapons?
No.
Or is it the mindset in terms of utilization or the apathy, something that Mr. Fankhauser said.
I think
I
it's
want you
the
to answer
mindset-
that, and then
okay.
you want to weigh in, no?
Go ahead.
Both things that they said is true, but what's different from when we grew up than what it is now is you have all this social media. You have all these video games that
Yeah.
show graphic things that puts all these ideas in kids' minds that normally they wouldn't have seen that. I never saw that. And movies, also movies, they're so real now compared to back then. Now, you would see a scene, you would know that it's a love scene, but you don't see nothing else. But you already know it's there. Now you see the whole scene.
You know, you must be looking at the notes in my head. That's going to be the next question I was going to ask.
We did it ourselves so we're growing up in a society where we didn't see that growing up, and that's why we turned out all right. And we don't have those issues, but our kids today, they're growing up in this.
Yeah.
So I started out by talking about technology, and obviously technology is one of the most significant platforms for what you're referring to that we're going to talk about is the advent and the proliferation of social media. How has that played a role? And I want to go back to you. I know you basically set the stage for this discussion in terms of providing access to information that we may not have had access to. How has social media played a role? Or how do you believe social media and access through social media has played a role in the education?
It's a double-edged sword. Social media is good if you use it the right way, but sadly there's no, you know how we go to school, we have rules and there's limits. There's no rules or limits to social media. That's the problem.
And you think that is now spilled over in terms of the overall behaviors and dispositions of our students in the classroom?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if you
Yes.
look at it, for example, going back to the thing
Absolutely.
of gun violence and how children, I'm at an elementary school, but they probably know more about Call of Duty and all these games than they actually do in the academic process. Now, why when we went to a movie, how old are you? You can't go into that movie theater without an adult for a PG-13. That's not even there, but yet they can get a game online or at the store if they're not using Amazon. But they can get it without any problem. You know, nobody cares. There's no restrictions, and we had the restrictions. We had, the movies. It's rated this. We didn't see that. Now, we don't even have to go to the movie theater. It's on TV.
We're an A-rated district by some accounts. Obviously, it has a number of metrics, and I've been a strong advocate and a vocal individual regarding the whole notion of letter grades and proficiency and the relationship or lack thereof to that. Despite many of the challenges that you've enumerated that we have and that exist, that have evolved, that have somewhat derided educational opportunities and educational successes as we've experienced them, we succeed anyway. You do this work anyway. You show up and teach and reach and guide and mentor and inspire and love children anyway. Why?
Because the
Let's start
influence
with you.
that we have, it starts with influence. It starts with our students, that we are that example that they don't see in their neighborhood. And some aspects and sometimes, and the home should be the greatest example of all. But sometimes our students do not have that example in the home. So we become that example, and we become that influence of positive behavior. We instill and place, in lieu of a negative behavior, we give them a reason to have a positive outcome and a positive behavior by the influence that we have over their lives. Cell phones is something that our students, to them, it's almost like a holy Bible, that phone. But we, as that influencer, can be greater than that cell phone, because they're going to see us every day. We keep showing up every day. Regardless of what they say or do, we show up and we do what we do.
You say to them, to many of us as adults. Martinez, why? Why do you continue to do it?
You know what? You could see the need in them with what Dr. Jackson was just saying. They don't have it at home. So we become the mom, the dad, the counselor, the nurse. We're everything.
Why?
I think it's our love for not just teaching our students, but seeing them learn and seeing them progress from one level to the next. Perfect example, I'm amazed at starting at South Miami Elementary and even reflecting back on one of my students, little Alice, skinny, scrawny little girl. Grew up and she's now the physical education teacher at South Miami Elementary. And I remember several years ago, her coming up to me at a workshop with these little children and introducing her children, saying, this was my physical education teacher. This is the reason why I got into teaching. And so our influence goes beyond the home, but the classroom becomes an extension of the home.
Yeah.
And maybe
It's
we
not about
can't,
the money.
we're not mom and dad.
It's
but-
definitely not about the money.
No,
It's about the love that
You know,
we have for these kids.
As we prepare to wrap up, I was listening to many of the challenges that we face in education, and I don't think they're restricted to education. Education, I believe, is the final frontier for social justice. I've said that for the last decade plus. I believe this is the final frontier for social justice, to be able to provide a platform for equality, for equity, for diversity, things that obviously people don't want us to talk about, but we have to believe in, because those are things that represent tenets that built this country,
That's right.
that built this country, that gave us all of the opportunities that we have to make the good, the bad, the ugly decisions that we often make. So we have to continue to fight for that. But when I hear a lot of the rancor and the cacophony and the issues that face us, it's almost takes me to Marvin Gaye, makes me want to holler and throw up my hands. But for 40 plus years, you all have not thrown up your hands. I'm sure you've hollered over the 40 years, but you have not thrown up your hands and walked out on the children. And I want to, first of all, thank you. You represent the institutional knowledge that we must have, we must embrace, we must appreciate, and we must respect. And as we prepare to close out shortly, what message would you give to a college student? Better yet, what message would you give to the young students that were just in this studio that are thinking about going into education? They're in the 5th grade and the 8th grade, and they're thinking about going into education in the next 8 to 10 years. What advice, what insight, what perspective, what reason would you give them individually and briefly why they should go into education? Or what would you tell them about going into education? I don't want to lock you into saying going into it, because that's a debate too with the teacher shortage we have. It's hard to get people to go into it. What would you tell them about going into education?
Well, I think as far as going into education, number one, you are going to change the life of your student, okay? And that student is going to reflect back on maybe not necessarily what mom or dad said at home, but what that teacher said. The countless hours that you're spending with that child, you can formulate that child in a positive way for a positive result. You know, we talk about social change. Those are our future leaders.
Okay.
They are teaching future leaders.
Mr. Martinez, what would you tell them about going into education?
Well, I probably wouldn't tell them that, but
Hey, this is real talk, okay?
but I probably wouldn't tell them that. But I think they'll see that themselves just by having me as their teacher, having probably Dr. Jackson or this PE teacher here. When you have this love for them, and they feel that, many times they want to do the same thing and pass it on to the next generation. So. Obviously, I would ask them to become a doctor or a nurse and make a lot of money and an attorney.
Hey,
but,
you don't hurt our recruitment efforts.
But
Yeah.
we do need teachers.
Yes.
We do need them.
Dr. Jackson, what would you tell them? Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
First of all, I just want to tell you thank you, because you really enabled me to be in the place where I am right now, to be able to stay as long as I'm here. So I just want to tell you thank you for that. I really heartfelt. Appreciate that. I would tell them that this is one of the most noblest professions that you can ever enter. You are pouring life into someone else. You're taking them to places they may never, ever be able to travel. But through an education, you can see a world through a different set of lens. And not only can you see it, but you can go there and you are helping someone else to reach a level in their life that they would not be able to obtain had it not been for a teacher.
All right, thank you. We're about to wrap up the show, and before we wrap up, I always ask my guests to give a shout out to an individual or someone that you would like to give a shout out to. Who would you like to give a shout out to before we close out? Mr. Martinez.
My mom.
Shout out to. Okay.
I only have one?
Yeah, you go for
Okay,
it.
I would like to. Okay, I would
She
like.
got
to,
me in this journey.
I would like. To,
She put me here.
I would like to give a shout out to President Collins,
Okay.
as well as my principal, Miss Morera, my former principal, Miss
Hey, one
Guerra,
more.
one more, my daughter, Nikki.
All right.
Okay.
Who would you like to give a shout out to?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to my extended family at Charles R. Hadley Elementary, teachers that have stood behind me many times, and all the way over to California where all my kids are. Three boys. So
Well, I want to give a shout out to you all for 129 years of combined service to the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, to our community, but most importantly to our children. You epitomize a phrase that I've often said, is that you represent the people who have planted seeds that have grown trees, that have borne fruit from which you will never eat. But for 40 plus years, you continue to plant. And we thank you for being a part of our garden of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I thank you for being a fellow educator as a part of the garden of educators. And I want to thank you for all that you do and continue to do, and support you in your continued doing. And we're going to continue to stay the course. We
Yes.
know it's not an easy road.
Nope.
Anything worth having is not. And despite many of the issues that linger, we still show up and we still continue to show out, not for the community, not for the parents, not for the legislatures, not for the superintendent, not for the board members, but you continue to show up
For
for the
kids.
children.
Yes.
And we thank you for that. This has been another episode of Real Talk with Dr. Steve Gallen III. Want to wish you well as you prepare for the upcoming holiday season. We want to thank you for all that you've done during this first quarter. And as you continue to do the work in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, in your communities, in your homes, in your churches throughout the state, nation, and world, always, always keep it real.
I've been on a vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I'm never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap. Got a bag from the way that I write it. Queen looking Tyson, do that ass survive, doing 80 to the house. Then I hit it to the sky, change haters on a tirade. Talking to their grip in the face, be still, let that hate stuff fade. We all want the same, we all want a meal in the safe. I wanna live like I'm trying to reach enlightenment. Trail spill from my lips, feel bent from the bib. Take a sip till I pass out. Try and get grit, but it don't make sense. Cause you can lose life on